They said space is silent, but I remember the night it spoke back. No explosions, no lights, just a subtle shift, a frequency that wasn't supposed to exist, not from a galaxy, not from dark matter, not from any known force. It was aware. I remember pacing the corridor, the cold floor beneath my feet. One of my students had been running calculations to an experimental tensor model, something theoretical, not practical, just math on a board. And then a response, not a malfunction, not feedback, but a pattern, as if someone or something saw the equation and replied. It began with a thought experiment, a thought, nothing more. We were exploring high-dimensional tensors, mapping gravity through imaginary time, a purely intellectual pursuit, like sketching blueprints for a machine that couldn't ever be built, but the data changed. Something bled through. One vector spiraled inward instead of out. Then the frequencies began to oscillate unnaturally, as if being held in place. One of the younger minds in the room laughed nervously and said, "It's like someone's pressing from the other side." I didn't laugh. In my bones I knew. This wasn't interaction, this was observation. They were looking back. We recorded it. The pulse lasted 14.2 seconds. Constant amplitude, impossible symmetry. Even the best instruments couldn't find the origin. It wasn't coming from anywhere. It just was sound, no energy, not in any form we could classify. But it was precise, intelligent. We looped it, broke it down, analyzed every waveform. And one pattern kept repeating. A spiral, not Fibonacci, not logarithmic, but something new, foreign. It wasn't noise, it was structure. A message, a warning. That was the first time I felt it. Not curiosity, not awe, fear. We did what any scientist would do. We answered, only we didn't use words. We sent a mirror pulse, the same shape, same frequency. Inverted, a reflection. Within 41 minutes we received something back, not identical but derivative, like a second voice entering a conversation you didn't know had already started. This one was longer. It altered our instruments. One monitor flickered, another overloaded, and then came the hum, low, continuous, like a pressure behind your ears, except there was no sound. We were no longer alone in the lab. No one said it. But we all knew it. We had made contact. And it wasn't from any known universe. It's difficult to describe the presence. It didn't arrive. It didn't enter. It had always been there, hidden behind the veil of what we call physics. The waveform began self-correcting in our simulations. It responded to variables we hadn't even entered. It knew our logic, our math. But more than that, it seemed disappointed. I cannot prove that. But the pattern slowed, as if losing interest, and then it pulsed once, a sharp contraction. All readings dropped to zero. It had left, but not before leaving one line of symbols in the simulation buffer. We couldn't decode it, not entirely, but one phrase remained, translated across all filters. You weren't supposed to find us. The buffer held only 13 characters. Simple, curved, almost ancient. But they weren't from any language, not earth-based, not mathematical. Still, our minds reacted to them. Several of us had dreams that night, vivid, too real. I saw a black sphere suspended over a frozen ocean. Another researcher dreamt of a staircase spiraling into itself. Another just screamed. She never described what she saw. We fed the symbols into every model we had. AI, symbolic logic, linguistic decoders. Only one partial match came up, a forgotten pattern in a Sumerian tablet etched as a warning. We tried recreating the event. We ran the numbers again, identical inputs, but no response, nothing. Then our simulation began to predict things accurately, too accurately. One model described a voltage spike we hadn't yet applied. Another displayed an image of a waveform we hadn't run, but did hours later. It was as if the simulation had become sentient, or worse, had merged with whatever that thing was. One student whispered, "We're not running it anymore, it's running us." We laughed nervously, but no one corrected him. Days passed. Subtle anomalies began to show up, not in the lab but in the world. Compass readings that reversed themselves. GPS drift no satellite could explain. An experiment in Switzerland detected mass fluctuations in vacuum. Physics was bleeding. One night my pen rolled off the desk and fell slower than it should have. I dropped a coin. It paused mid-air, just for a blink. I said nothing because I was beginning to realize something terrifying. Contact hadn't just been made. It was continuing, and it was reshaping our foundation. We had two choices: pursue it and risk everything, or erase it and pretend it never happened. We chose the latter. Hard drives were wiped, papers burned, we faked data corruption, submitted false reports. But we kept one thing, the original pulse, locked in a vault, analog only, no digital record. I argued with myself for weeks. Had we been given a glimpse of something divine, or were we warned off? One thing was certain, it knew we saw it, and we couldn't unsee it. 3 weeks later, my heart stopped for 17 seconds. Medically, I died. When I came back, I remembered only one thing, a voice not heard but understood. "This is not your layer." I kept that to myself until now, because I wasn't the only one. Two other team members reported blackouts. One described a moment where the world folded inward and he saw his own face, older, watching him from the other side. After that, he left science altogether, moved to a monastery, never spoke again. We had pierced something, and it had pierced us back. On the morning of October 9th, I woke up confused. My calendar read October 11th, 2 days, gone. I checked my notes, the lab logs, news clippings. Everything showed consistent timestamps. Emails I never remembered sending. Updates I didn't write. A voice memo from myself whispering, "Do not check the mirror." I don't remember recording it. Others experienced the same. Small time gaps, missing moments. One researcher aged visibly overnight, his beard white at the edges. Another had a healed scar he didn't have the day before. Time wasn't passing, it was being edited. His name was Tomasz. Brilliant mind, funny. He loved Bach and always brought tea for everyone. And then one day he didn't come in. We called. Nothing. We checked records. Emails bounced. Phone number invalid. We went to his apartment. Empty. No trace of occupancy. The landlord said it had been vacant for years. Even the group photo we had from a conference, he was gone from it. Just a space between shoulders, an unnatural gap. We checked university enrollment, birth records, passport logs. Thomas had never existed, except we remembered him. Whatever we contacted, it could erase. There was one room in the lab, no instruments, just old storage and a wall-mounted mirror. We never paid attention to it, until one day I walked past it and stopped. The reflection lagged by half a second. I waved. It followed, delayed, as if it were processing. Later I returned with a colleague. He looked into the mirror and immediately backed away. He said, "That's not me," and he was right. In the reflection, his eyes didn't blink. They stared back, watching us. We covered it after that, but the sound behind it never stopped. We had assumed it was a consciousness, an entity, a being from another place. But we were wrong. It wasn't alive, not in the way we define life. It was structure, a rule, an ancient law written outside of space-time, wrapped around reality like an exoskeleton. And when we reached out with our theories, our math, we didn't speak to it. We activated it. Like stepping on an old floorboard that creaks not from weight but memory. It had been waiting, and now it was awake again. In the final days, we stopped writing equations, because every time we completed one, something changed. One morning, the gravitational constant in the textbooks had shifted by 0.003%. It was subtle, but it had always been that way. History wasn't being rewritten, it was being retuned. By the end, we realized the entity, the law, wasn't responding to us, it was using us, our minds, our equations, as a lens to observe itself. We hadn't contacted something in another universe. We had allowed something to reflect through ours, and it was learning faster than we ever expected. We thought we could contain it, but the entity or the law had already entered through the cracks. One evening I stared at a blackboard full of equations and watched them dissolve, not fade, not erase. They unwrote themselves. Symbols reversed, lines curved inward, variables cancelled, and then the board was blank. But I remembered writing them. I went to the hallway. A student passed me and didn't recognize me. He had worked with me for 4 years. Now I was a stranger. The law was not destroying, it was correcting. We were the error. Then came the night of the voice. No audio, no vibration, just understanding immediate and deep implanted in the mind. It said, "You were not designed to interpret this layer." I was frozen. And yet, I asked, why us? Why now? The answer came like gravity, silent but undeniable. Because you started to look. And looking creates structure. Observation wasn't neutral, it was participation. In trying to see the unknown, we gave it form. And once it had form, it could see us. We shut down the project. No announcement, no closure, just silence. But before leaving the lab, I returned to the room with the mirror. This time, it didn't reflect me. It showed a vast, endless lattice like geometry made of thought. And in its center, a symbol glowing red, a spiral within a spiral. It hovered for exactly 8 seconds, then vanished. When I looked down at the floor, the same spiral had been burned into the tile. And underneath it, scratched in English, though none of us had written it, "You made contact with a boundary, it made contact with you." Years passed, I gave up the lab, stopped writing, burned my notes, and yet, sometimes I still hear it, not in dreams, not in sound, in equations. They come to me uninvited, perfect, alien, as if whispered from a deeper truth. Once I wrote one down on paper, it vanished before I could show anyone. The page dissolved into dust, and then I remembered the symbol from the simulation, the phrase etched into the code, "You weren't supposed to find us." I fear now that we didn't find them. They allowed us to, so they could find themselves through us. I've come to understand what we really did. We didn't contact a being. We contacted a self-checking system, a cosmic diagnostic code embedded in the fabric of realities. And when we pinged it with thought, it ran its check and found something it didn't like, us. So it's cleaning, not with war, not with violence, with subtle adjustments, vanishing memories, shifted constants, lost names, history rewritten not with ink but with permission. It doesn't erase everything, just the parts that weren't supposed to be, like us, like me. And now that I've said all this, I know what happens next. So if you're hearing this, it means I've already been removed.